Hi, welcome everyone. We're just going to give it one moment to let some more folks join. We're trickling in. Thank you for joining us for your lunch hour. Appreciate it. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Hi, everyone. My name is Carrie. I am the Senior Organizing Manager here at Faribault, Washington. For those of you who are new to us or joining us for the first time, as you might know, Faribault, Washington is a nonpartisan nonprofit working to bring ranked choice voting here to Washington. We are really excited to introduce you to our guests today. We have a really exciting conversation, but just wanted to do a little bit of housekeeping first. If you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A. You can find that on the bottom of your Zoom screen. We will be taking audience questions directly after our panel. And so I think with that, I am ready to introduce my colleague, Nilu Jenks. Nilu is our political director here at Faribault, Washington. Nilu is a dedicated community advocate who loves to engage with and serve her community. Nilu is a second-generation Iranian American whose family was granted asylum to the United States. And from her experiences, she is a strong believer in democratic reform. A mother of two and a dog and two cats, Nilu became a strong fan of ranked choice voting through her work with climate advocacy groups. Nilu has been Faribault, Washington's political director since 2003. We're also especially grateful to have this conversation with Nilu, given her lived experience. Thank you, Nilu. Next, I want to bring on Jake Garcia. Jake is the policy director for the Latino Community Fund of Washington. Jake hails from Vancouver, Washington, where he cut his teeth organizing farmers while working for various state and local political campaigns. Now, Jake spends his time lobbying for Latinx communities, priorities, and developing public policy to ensure economic security and fair representation for all. Welcome, Jake. Thank you. I also want to bring on Soumyo Lahiri-Gupta, a proud child of two Indian American immigrants. Soumyo has seen how immigrants are treated both from an outside and inside perspective, and uses his experience to push for a future where immigration at every level is normalized, accepted, welcomed, and streamlined. Soumyo first began his activism and advocacy at the age of 12, phone banking for former President Barack Obama's 2008 campaign. Since then, Soumyo has been involved in every election in his life. In 2022, he helped lead the field operations in Washington's 3rd congressional district, which resulted in flipping a congressional seat. He also graduated with his Juris Doctor in 2021 from American University, where he worked as student immigration attorney. Welcome, Soumyo. We're really excited to have all of these people here with us today. As many of you on the call already know, the premise of this conversation is set by our current Secretary of State, Steve Hobbs. Secretary of State Hobbs is not a big fan of ranked choice voting, and he uses two personal examples to make his case. One we addressed last month, talking about his son with disabilities and his concern that ranked choice voting might not be accessible to all voters. And he also describes ranked choice voting possibly being a concern for those who are newly naturalized citizens to the United States. So we brought in a panel of people who can speak directly to that experience with their own and their family's history. So thank you all so much for being here. I have introduced everybody, but I'd love everybody to sort of tell us a little bit more about their organization and how you yourself contribute to its impact. I'll start with Soumyo.
Sorry, I lost my mouth there for a moment. Hi, thank you so much for having me on this panel. As Kari mentioned, my name's Soumyo, he, him. I work as an immigration advocacy manager with OneAmerica. OneAmerica has a vision that immigrants are not only surviving in this country, but thriving in this country. Everyone deserves to thrive. Everyone deserves a new home. We recognize that mobility is not often a choice, and no one can account for every single circumstance. So it's important that we build a country that's the most welcoming, accepting, and integrating to help everyone. It's what our country was founded on. Specifically at OneAmerica, I work on our federal policy platforms for immigration, working closely with our members of Congress, as well as helping lead a push to expand unemployment insurance for undocumented workers here in Washington.
Thank you so much for all your good work. Jake, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your work?
Absolutely. And first and foremost, thanks so much for the opportunity to join y'all today and get into the weeds a little bit. Latino Community Fund is a 501c3 nonprofit that's dedicated to empowering our Latinx community here in Washington, from economic support, like our small business assistance work and providing fresh bucks to residents in Seattle who are food insecure, to public health outreach, to policy advocacy. Really, LCF is in the middle of it all when it comes to supporting that vision of a vibrant and thriving Washington for all. On the other side, we have our C4, 501c4 sister organization, Progreso, Latino Progress. That is responsible for making direct voter contact and encouraging folks to be fully engaged and participate in the election system that we have right now, so that we can have and continue to build a truly representative and multiracial democracy.
Thank you so much. And Nilu, would you like to tell us about your work?
Yeah, hi all. I just grateful to be here, grateful for everyone joining us. I started as political director in 2023. Carrie, you said 2003, which gave me a little bit of a giggle. I was like, I would have loved to have been doing this work for this long. I am helping to develop a little bit of a political strategy for us, to make sure that we can bring ranked choice voting to our state and really educate our candidates and legislators too, is part of the work, and help direct some of our supporters to candidates they can support to help flip our legislature and, in ranked choice voting. We use flip in so many ways these days, but yeah, happy to be here and doing that.
Thank you so much, all. Well, I think I feel safe in saying that we have some experts of lived experience and community support on this call. So I'm really excited to talk about this really big question. Some opponents, namely our Secretary of State, Steve Hobbs, is concerned that ranked choice voting would be too difficult for non-native English speakers and naturalized citizens to the US. What do you all think about that? Do you think that ranked choice voting might be too difficult than any other voting system? Jake, I just saw your hand, so no? Okay, I'll go to Nilu first then.
Sure, I can start. I really don't think so. I remember very distinctly working with my parents, testing them when they were going for their naturalization test. And that is a very difficult and challenging test that I think most Americans could not pass. And if they can do those I'm talking they as my parents, but really I think anybody going through that process, like, why would they have such a hard time ranking? It doesn't seem like a natural answer to me. And voting itself, once you participate, the hard part isn't vote. You vote, it's getting informed about the candidates and all that, and that's often could be about access via language, and that is something that we can do. Ranking is something we do all the time. If I ask everyone right now, well, who has the best background, I bet everyone will be able to do it really quickly like this. Nothing against anybody's background. I like my little trees back there, but everybody, I think, could do that pretty naturally.
Thank you. I'll go to Jake since you raised your hand.
I'm just clicking around over here, pay no mind to me, but really, I think, one part of your question that sticks out to me is, would folks struggle, non-English speakers struggle, or naturalized citizens struggle with RCV more than any other voting system? And my answer is absolutely not. In fact, LCF has sued over this exact issue. We've litigated it because we know the existing system has been used to suppress our voice, specifically in Central Washington, where if you even have a Spanish sounding surname, your ballot could be tossed out the window. And this is a real failure of our voting system. And so I think if you're navigating that already, if you're somebody who comes to this country and becomes a naturalized citizen, that is already a barrier in and of itself. And so I think when we're thinking about how you can participate more fully in the election system, RCV is not the barrier here. The barrier here is making sure that everybody has equitable access to it and making sure that we're fully informing folks about how it works and how you can have your voice heard. Or I feel like it's really a matter of how can we ensure that regardless of the system that we have at hand, that our voice is being heard and that we have a truly representative government working with us, not against us.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. I think access and understanding, those are things we can do. Those are things we can do regardless of system. So appreciate that. Soumyo, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I really want to lift up what Nilu said regarding the naturalization process. It is such a complicated process as a whole. And in comparison, ranked choice voting is basically walking down the street in comparison. There are so many barriers to the naturalization process, so many intricate steps that that naturalized citizens have already gone through. Ranked choice voting is not the hurdle that people think it is. If they can get through the naturalization process, ranked choice voting is a really easy thing to get people on board with. And it's important that our voices are heard properly too, because in a lot of other countries, ranked choice voting does exist, or multi-party systems do exist. There are different forms of voting all over the country. And I think it's a false assumption to think that if we change one little thing about our voting system, it will make it confusing for everyone.
It's so true. And I'll also echo that something Nilu said too, which is that we rank every day. That's the natural way we make decisions. It actually is a more intuitive, more useful tool for a lot of folks. So thank you so much. I also want to tag on to something you said, Soumyo, that this is already used in other cities, other countries, other states. And I'd love to ask you all, have you heard this concern raised that naturalized citizens might not be able to use ranked choice voting? Nilu has some really recent experience with this, so I want to go to you first.
Yeah, I was just in Ireland to observe their elections, their local elections, and also for the EU representative last month. And one thing that's really interesting there is they're migrant voters, so they use migrant instead of immigrant, are allowed to vote in local elections. And Ireland has been using a single transferable vote, which is for proportional representation. They get multiple representatives for over 100 years. And I specifically asked, two candidates who we got to meet who both won their reelection, and the migrant advocate that we came and had speak to us, if this was something that they heard or that resounded with them, because I said this is something that our Washington State Secretary of State was saying, and they were very clear in saying that is not an issue that they had heard brought up at all. In fact, for them, the bigger issues were, making sure there's language access and making sure that people feel welcome to vote, and that, and for them, you're talking, they're not yet naturalized and they're taking part. And so, but that's true here too, like making sure people feel they have the right to say, right to say, like right to say something, right to say and take part, but also that they're welcome, and perhaps not having people say they won't be able to do something or won't understand. Those are barriers that I think are inherently part of being a marginalized community. Like, I know what it feels like to be told that you won't get this, you can't be part of this. And so it was really neat to see that in Ireland, that yes, people can not only do ranked choice voting, they can do single transferable vote and have very, very informed decisions just like we do, and then be able to reflect their priorities. So I really appreciated that.
Thank you so much. Jake and Soumyo, I'll open it to you if there's anything you want to add on to that.
I haven't personally heard it. I wouldn't be surprised if similar folks or I should say, if folks who have a similar viewpoint of Secretary Hobbs were using our communities as scapegoats. I wouldn't be surprised, but I personally haven't heard that.
same with me. I have not heard that concern either. Going back to the point I made earlier, there are a lot of other countries that use it. India uses it to elect their president. So, and India is one of the largest democracies in the world. Like, their voting population is more than our total population. So I believe that is a concern used to, what Jake said, scapegoat our communities.
Yeah, and we don't need that. We don't need that.
I'm just going to answer one quick question because it's real. I see it in the audience. Elliot Hazard. Naturalized citizens are technically immigrants. Yes. In Ireland, non-citizens are allowed to vote, but only in local elections.
Thanks so much for that. All right, so now that we've established, in my view, we've established that ranked choice voting is not going to be the barrier or even a barrier to naturalized citizens voting and being full participants in our electoral process. I would love to hear from you all why you support ranked choice voting. Soumyo, I'll start with you. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. I've had a passion about elections since I was 12. The intricacies of the process, the intricacies of elections, the intricacies of campaigns, it's very all fascinating. I've studied different versions of elections, different versions of voting. And one thing that is clear is that isolating choices down for only one candidate in a first past post system that we have doesn't truly represent the vote or the voice of the people. And I think anything that we can do to make the system we have, voting system we have, better through ranked choice voting, so people are actually heard, so people's votes aren't wasted, is a very good thing. I think one of the prime gripes I have as a whole is how sometimes our primary system for president works and the timing of these primaries amongst all the states. New Mexico never gets an option to actually choose anyone, despite the fact that everyone's on the ballot. And that can be solved partially with ranked choice voting, that for like when it comes down to New Mexico's turn to vote, there could be more options because more people have truly spoken their voice.
I appreciate that so much. I just learned a staggering statistic that most congressional elections are decided really in the primaries, and because primary votes tend to be lower, it's only 8% of our voting population that chooses the majority of our congressional candidates, which is absolutely staggering. And when we pair that with the voter suppression of naturalized citizens, it really is a double whammy, probably triple, quadruple. There's things I'm sure I'm not mentioning. So to consider how ranked choice voting can actually open that up is really exciting. Jake, why do you like ranked choice voting?
Well, there's the personal side of it. Back in, oh my gosh, I don't want to date myself. I'm feeling really old. But back in the day, I did work on a Secretary of State's campaign, and really that's where I got bit by the fair representation bug. And so personally, I support ranked choice voting because adequate representation is sort of the linchpin of our democracy. But I think organizationally, LCF supports ranked choice voting because of its capacity really to turn down the temperature on, so to speak, on election rhetoric. I think, when we as a society and in our communities reward candidates who appeal to a broader base of folks, that helps ensure a more civil dialogue, a more civil discourse among folks who are running, and really it helps avoid throwing people under the bus, like our community, like the Latino community, like the various communities that are being thrown under the bus. And so we support ranked choice voting because it can make a tangible difference in the day-to-day lives of folks in even non-election season.
Thank you so much for that. Thank you. Nilu, what do you like about ranked choice voting?
Things. I came to ranked choice voting, like you mentioned in the opening, through climate advocacy. And, we know that countries that have ranked choice voting have better climate policies. And part of that is you have much better and more robust conversations around priorities and actual things you want to put in place rather than negative campaigning that's targeting people. And these days, I have to say, Jake, I agree. Bringing down the temperature of the election process is, I think, something that we're all really feeling. Like, how do we, not have such a angry and hostile environment for electoral process? It just doesn't feel good. And that's really probably my top reason right now. I don't want to hate my neighbors. I don't want to hate people that disagree with me. I want to work with them and understand their priorities, which I think is something that candidates who are in a ranked choice voting process will do. They will have to speak to priorities and educate the public better, and then ideally get legislation that is really more representative of everyone, and ideally also more effective, not undone every other election, which is something we also see here.
Thank you. And I'd love to sort of push that question around again and really focus it on, are there ways you see ranked choice voting actually empowering newly naturalized citizens rather than being something that gatekeeps them from this process? Nilu, I'll start with you. I'm going backwards and forwards.
Great. So I ran for Seattle City Council last year, and very early on, the only immigrant in the race who was running dropped out, and their top reason that he stated to me was because there was no ranked choice voting. And that really was very upsetting to me, in a community that is nearly 40% people of color in North Seattle and North Seattle, and primarily immigrants. That just didn't seem right. And so, he recognized how hard it would be for him without that process, just because of the way we narrow so quickly down in the primaries and the way it's done. And that's something that stuck with me. He would have stayed in. If nothing else, I think ranked choice voting lets more people feel they have a chance to win and therefore run.
And having a chance to win because they actually get to have a true reflection and representation of their community rather than just empowering that small fraction of primary voters, that 8%. Yeah, that's powerful. Soumyo, are there ways you can see ranked choice voting empowering newly naturalized citizens?
Yeah, OneAmerica actually hosts a lot of naturalization clinics through our WNA program, Washington New Americans program. And the excitement I've seen our new Americans have casting their ballot for the first time this year, it's so heartwarming and it's so nice. But there are also experiences of like, does my vote really matter? There's that concern. Am I just going to get drowned out amongst the 165 million other voices that are voting? Does it even matter? Will my choice even make a difference? And I think it's that last part. Will my choice make a difference? Where ranked choice voting can empower our new Americans to have the energy to vote, to put their ballot in, to remember to mail their ballot in, although everyone should remember to mail their ballot in, just as a whole. And we saw this also, like, I think last year or the year before with Alaska's Senate race, I believe, where I believe Sarah Palin was favored to win and she ended up losing. And ranked choice voting did that. It showed that no matter how small your voice, it does matter.
Absolutely. We like to sum it up by saying ranked choice voting gives you more voice and more choice. And to have your first voting experience be something that you can believe is impactful and empowering is huge. And I think a lot of Americans, not just newly naturalized citizens, would feel empowered by that. Turn in your ballot by August 6th at 8 p.m. Thank you. Jake?
I appreciate the get out the vote efforts happening right now. But I will say, to Soumyo's point, like, not only is it exciting, but it's energizing, right? Like it actually like makes you want to pick up the pen and fill out the little bubble, right? Like that is what the voting experience should be like. And any opportunity that we have to enrich that experience, to make sure that experience is actually like making a difference for folks, like actually like bringing them out and able to talk about why they, voted for who they did with their own community, that just builds more community, that builds stronger relationships between community and their elected officials. Like, it's overall just an incredible opportunity to be able to energize folks who would otherwise not be super enthused about voting.
It's so true. I think of politics at its best can be a community conversation, a really robust community conversation about our priorities and our values and our needs. And from where I sit, ranked choice voting really is a path forward to that. So I appreciate you naming that, and newly naturalized citizens absolutely should have a strong and empowered voice in that conversation. As we think about the ways that we would actually need to unroll ranked choice voting and who is responsible for making sure that voters have access to participating in our elections, I'd love to hear your thoughts of like who's involved in this process, who needs to really be taking responsibility here. And I'll kick it to Nilu first.
Going first again. I feel like such an oldest child right now.
Sorry. We can kick it around.
No, it's okay. What I wrote down first was just all of us. It is all of our responsibilities to make sure everybody feels that they are welcome to partake in our democracy and have a say. So I hope everyone owns that, in these couple weeks, asking everyone to vote. But really, in terms of ranked choice voting, it is the Secretary of State's job to make sure that access is available equally to everyone so they can take part in our system. And, translation and education and whatever is needed, we just did disability rights for every community, and every person in this state and country should be able to equally access and understand our voting process, whatever that is. I would argue that ranked choice voting is not that hard for the voter, maybe on the counting side, but I have a lot of faith in our auditors. But, so all of us, and there are people who are specifically charged with these, the education component. And we have wonderful orgs who help partner in that work, who have direct access into communities. So I'm excited to let Jake and Soumyo speak about that.
Yeah, thank you. And yeah, what can we do as you're answering this question of like, who is this up to? I'd love to expand it to how do we make sure that the ranked choice voting movement includes our naturalized citizen population, and especially those whose first language isn't English. Yeah. I'll go to Soumyo next.
Yeah, I very much agree with Nilu's point of everyone. This is responsibility for everyone, but I'm also that kid in his government class that bought way too much into the textbook talking points of that we are a marketplace of ideas. We elect government officials to listen to us because they're representative in nature, and the government has a social contract with sorry, I can feel like my middle school self coming out a little bit. But I very much do agree that these are principles that we are founded on. They are principles that have the potential to make our world more equitable. The problem is these principles aren't really applied in the systems we have. And it's the responsibility of all of us to make sure that these principles are properly listened to, properly applied, so all of our voices can be heard. It is very much the responsibility of all of us. We have to come together to make this happen so we are listened to, because the more of us there are, the louder our voice shouts as one for the changes that we need, like ranked choice voting. I had one other point, but I have lost it. I apologize.
No, we'll circle around to you. Maybe that middle schooler needs to hear another student's voice, and then it'll come up. Thank you. Jake, when you think of whose responsibility it is to make sure that all voters have equal access to our election systems, and how do we be the most inclusive, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Soumyo and Nilu on everything that they've said so far, right? Like, I do agree it's all of our responsibility in terms of the social contract for voting. But the greatest weight does fall on the administrators and of the elections and the statewide office that's responsible for managing our elections, right? I think there's been real forward momentum to innovate our election systems, from alternatives for voter verification to reducing inequities in ballot curing. But the work doesn't stop with some pilot projects. It doesn't stop with small scale investments here and there. It has to keep moving towards progressively bigger and more comprehensive reforms. And that's where I think the greatest burden is. And yes, it does fall on the administrators to ultimately implement this work and ultimately execute it, as well as the Secretary of State's office. But really, it's on us too to make sure our neighbors know, like, hey, here is why it matters. Here's how you can be engaged. That is where community really matters and really needs to show up.
Thank you so much for that. Yeah, I think the person, I'm just going to name it, the person who really is the most, carries the most weight in ensuring that naturalized citizens can be part of our electoral process in a really meaningful way is our Secretary of State. He is the directive, he is the head of that. So we would hope, and we'd love to partner with our Secretary of State to make sure that we can implement ranked choice voting smoothly and equitably. Soumyo, did that thought come around?
Yeah, it was a phrase that education can change the nation. I think education and like education mixed with language access to bring our immigrant communities in, especially non-native English speakers, into this ranked choice voting movement, so they can truly come into their own on the power that their voice could have, and working with Secretary Hobbs to make this happen.
I love that. Education can change the nation. It's so true. Which I'll connect back to what we were hearing about. It is up to us and our communities, and we are part of that education. Thank you for that. I'd love to move over and take some questions from the audience. We've been getting lots of great questions, and so I'm going to bring these in. There's a question from somebody named John Morgan who's wondering if there are Americans who might have emigrated elsewhere and voted with ranked choice voting. Do we have any thoughts on that? I'm going to leave that open.
I mean, I'm sure there are. I haven't talked to anybody, you know, people who have moved from the US to Ireland. I did meet a professor in Ireland. I didn't ask him, you know, he seemed to enjoy it. So, but there are many countries that use some form of ranked choice voting across the world. And there are a lot of expats, as we call them, who I'm sure have engaged. I don't know, Jake or Soumyo, if you know. I'm now wondering, my in-laws lived in India for 25 years. I'm like, maybe they used ranked choice voting, and I don't know. They didn't, although they didn't get citizenship there. So it would, yeah.
It's an interesting question. Thank you for bringing it up, John. We also have a question from Pamela, which might be getting possibly more towards the heart of what Secretary of State Hobbs has been referring to with naturalized citizens and different things. But we're talking about relearning a skill. Are there people who have come from other countries who maybe voted in their home countries and now need to relearn how to vote in our systems? How can we engage in that process and making sure folks who are newcomers to American democracy are ready to use ranked choice voting? And Nilu, I'm not going to call on you first this time. Jake, can I push it to you?
Yes, you may, because really this boils down to, and Pamela, thank you for the question, because it is so important. It really does boil down to community education, right? The bulk of the burden does fall on Secretary of State Hobbs' office to do some of the education and to really roll it out and implement it successfully. But also That doesn't mean our organizations, our communities have to sit on the bench for this one. We can educate one another. We can make sure that when we are holding workshops just like this, when we're holding town halls, when we're in public and we're talking about this, we can make sure we're educating and doing so as a trusted community messenger. I can tell you the number of times, my dad, who I love greatly, but also frustrates the ever living heck out of me because he would get a piece of mail with all this information. He'd be like, son, like, explain this to me. Tell me what this means. But that is a reality that a lot of immigrant families face. Like we, can rely on our family, we can rely on our community more than we can trust, government entities. That is a bare reality that we have to face, but it's one that we can lean into, and I do so through community education.
I love that. I love that. So when we're thinking of relearning skills and engaging fully, Soumyo, do you have any ideas of what that might look like?
I agree with Jay. Community engagement, community education, learning from our communities as trusted messengers, as trusted sources, as people who are involved and helpful in these communities. I also think the voting process is different in every single country as a whole, regardless of ranked choice voting. When immigrants come into this country, get naturalized, they are relearning how to vote as a whole, whether it be because of a different party system, a different representative system, say they had a prime minister, whatnot. Every system's different. I think there is an important aspect that community resources do need to be available. Community education is available, but I also don't think it is as big of a lift as those who are against ranked choice voting for this reason claim them to be.
So I have lived in 4 states as an adult, and I voted in 3 of them. I actually registered in 4, but only stayed in 1 for 9 months because I got laid off quickly. It had nothing to do with me. Massive layoff. You'll have heard of it, but we won't talk about it. So, but I have registered to vote in Massachusetts, Texas, California, and Washington. And part of the issue is learning how to register to vote. This is not just about immigrants. This is about people moving across the states and knowing how to access our electoral process and what it looks like. We vote by mail in California and Washington. That's not true in other states. And so part of it is just how do you educate people to gain information and translating it into different languages and accessing community organizers or advocates or highly respected community messengers is a great way to get that information out. But I think this idea that it would be very different from immigrants than from anybody else is actually inherently flawed. Having done it myself, yes, my mother calls me and asks me how to find information because she lived in Massachusetts, Oklahoma, and Canada, and had, there she didn't vote, she didn't become a citizen, and then California. And I had to say, hey, Mom, this is a voter guide, these are the newspapers. And she goes and reads about it. She has questions, she comes back like any family member would do. But remember that, anything that you have a hurdle, like when you've moved across the state and had to, like get your driver's license and does it automatically register you or does it not, or all these things are similar conversations. And I really encourage people to not think of immigrants as so very different from themselves, even if they come here as adults like my parents did. It's more a language thing, and ranking is more a mathematical process than it is a language one. So making sure that we just educate our communities, get out information about candidates, educate like on policy and priorities is perhaps a bigger hurdle, I think. And then putting out there how to vote. My best friend's English actually, and her friend was visiting from England. They're both in the theater world, and they were flying back yesterday, and her friend was so excited. She's like, I put the ballot in the mailbox. She went and showed me the ballot box, and obviously she didn't vote for my friend, but it's just something simple like that. And this is how you vote here. Because she thought it was cool to mail in a ballot, and actually so do I. So, yeah.
Thank you so much. I want to relift. Let's not think about our newly naturalized citizens as so different than us. Ranked choice voting is a tool that we're all going to have to use. we're all going to have to learn. And from everywhere it's been implemented in the 50 municipalities across our country, the 2 states and the several countries that use it, it's a doable process. It is not as big of a barrier as we think. I do want to offer one more round of, are there any other people besides our Secretary of State who you've heard had this concern? We really, because obviously we feel, maybe this concern is a bit unfounded, but are there others who might share it? And how can we assuage their fears? Go ahead, Soumyo.
As I mentioned, I haven't heard anyone, and I feel weird naming this because I think this is like the looming thing. This concern comes with a lot of false assumptions about our communities as a whole that need to be, like, as the systems level, that is a discussion that needs to be had at a certain point in terms of the false assumptions of our immigrant population and immigrant communities underestimating us a lot. And I think part of that concern stems from this systems-based issue, but also a fear of change at the same time. But just wanted to uplift that.
Thank you. Thank you. That's exactly why we wanted to have this conversation, because I appreciate it. Jake or Nilu, would you like to add anything?
Really just what Soumyo said. I mean, I haven't had actually anybody else say specifically about the immigrant or naturalized citizens to me, but it is reminiscent of things I've heard said about my parents and my community overall, that don't land well for me, just because I see how much immigrants contribute and how much they can do and how much they're navigating every single day, and they just do beautifully, right? And if they have challenges, I'm not sure it's greater than anybody else's challenges in life. They're just different. But let me take a step back and say, I do welcome feedback. If people have concerns and there are questions, that's why we're doing this. It's not, I'm not trying to sing to the choir, like, Carrie or any of us. These are important conversations because they highlight spaces where we need to make sure that work happens. When ranked choice voting comes to Washington State and across Washington State, I will want to partner with Jake and Soumyo and many other organizations to make sure that we have equal access and are accessing community messengers to do this work, because it is important to make sure that we're educating people. And I do welcome, as an organization, we welcome your questions. This is not, we're not here to smack you down or anything like that. It really is, something that I've been thinking about a lot. Like I said, in Ireland, I specifically asked that question. Is this a thing you see as someone who actually has non-citizens voting in this process? Because we don't want to get this wrong. We want to make sure everyone has access. So thank you, Lisa, for that question. And I will be keeping an eye out for it. I do want to make sure that we don't miss things as we go along, so we can make sure the whole intention is to make this as inclusive a process and experience as we can.
Thank you so much. And I especially want to tie in this call to working together and working with these great organizations that are on our call with us right now. We do hope to continue working together and plan to work together. And we want to invite our supporters and everybody who supports ranked choice voting to learn more about them. So Jake and Soumyo, how can people learn more about your orgs and how can we get involved?
Yeah, so you can visit latinocommunityfund.org or Progreso WA, so Progreso, Progreso, Washington, .org to get involved or get information about what we're doing right now to face our shared challenges head on.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Soumyo, how can we get involved with We Are OneAmerica?
Yeah, so the best way to get involved is to go to our website, weareoneamerica.org, or our Facebook page. On our website, we'll often have like a list of community events, because one thing about One America that I really love is we're not just we are a community-based organization filled with members from our communities. Just looking for in the very near future, for lack of a better term, we do have a member assembly coming up on September 7th that you'll see on our events page. And we'd love for you to join us if you're able to. It'll be in Seattle at the Embassy Suites. I forgot the specific, Pioneer Place on September 7th. You can find more information at weareoneamerica.org.
Thank you. I love a direct call to action. All right, September 7th, We Are One America, Seattle. Find it. We'll be there. Jake and Soumyo, thank you so much for contributing your wisdom, your lived experience, your hope, and your contributions to our democracy with us here today. We're so grateful to be in partnership and community with you. And Soumyo, thank you for bringing your middle school self. Jake, thank you for always bringing your enthusiasm. It's such a gift. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
Absolutely. All right. Big breath. That was a great conversation. We're so grateful to be able to do this. I'm going to shift gears a little bit and bring us kind of out of the theoretical into the present day. Sort of, how do we implement ranked choice voting? What does it need? What does it take? What is it going to take for us to be able to talk to all of these different communities and talk to every voter and make sure we can do this? And I think that first piece is just passing legislation. And I'm really excited to be able to ask our political director a few questions about building political power, why it's important, and how to get involved. Nilu, you headed up our endorsements process for the very first time this year. Can you tell us a little bit about why we are doing endorsements now and not just simply saying, hey, this candidate supports ranked choice voting?
Yeah, we were looking to target races where we felt that people could really have an impact, where there are people who had a really good chance of getting over the line, but and making sure also as we did it, they were educating candidates. So I want to take a step back and, having been a candidate, having received 100 endorsement questionnaires and filled them all out, we saw a lot of things. And one thing I really appreciated was one that was more like an open book test. So our endorsement questionnaire is available online. People can go look at it. Please don't fill it out unless you're running, because it'll flood my inbox. But we wanted candidates to understand and get videos and understand some of the priorities, but also looking at who's running in the races. Unfortunately, in this day and age, without ranked choice voting, you have to look at factors like fundraising and just how things are going, and then directing votes towards people. And in places where we don't have a candidate that we can strongly support, people could write us and say, do you know if candidates in this race support ranked choice voting? But endorsement is a little bit stronger. It's like, this is, somebody that we think will definitely champion this, isn't just kind of saying, yeah, I like ranked choice voting, but I don't know that it would actually champion legislation, like co-sponsor your legislation. That's important as well. And then also, people not splitting votes, being careful about that too, is like just another factor that comes up for us. So just kind of a general, peeking a little bit behind the scenes, and saying there are more ranked choice voting supporters out there, but endorsement process is just a little bit different. It's trying to direct voters and our supporters to try and make it really successful in our state, specifically in the legislature.
Thank you so much for that. I want to hone in just even a little bit more, why are endorsements so important, and why are we doing them for the first time this year?
It's to leverage our supporters. It's, looking whether it's on I did say specifically in the legislature, but, next round will include some commissioners, who have put in their endorsement forms, people who are going in general. More people could apply for endorsement now too, or turn in endorsement questionnaires. I wouldn't quite say apply, but the important part is really in our supporters turning around and responding to that. And, I can't offer anybody, somebody wrote and said, well, can you tell me everything about these candidates' priorities? I cannot. They change all the time in terms of what's coming out and what they're being asked. And also I encourage people to go look at any candidate and see who else has endorsed them, what their priorities are, what's going on in that race. But you can support across in another legislative district. That's another question that comes up. You are allowed to do that. People are doing it all the time. And especially when we don't have ranked choice voting, I encourage you to think about how we can bring it to our state. It does matter what your legislator in the district next to you does. So that's really what we were thinking. How can we make this happen in our state when we haven't seen all legislators stepping up? And we're like, how can we make this change? So I'm going to lead right into the canvassing question a little bit. Why have we asked people to canvass? How did we pick these 4? It's like, these are the races we think have a really good chance where we could win and where we think we may find more legislative champions. Look at them, see what their other priorities are. Do they fall in line with you or not? That's your work to do. But for us, who our priority is getting ranked choice voting across the line, that's how we've chosen in the 4 that we have found most important. And we really would love for our supporters to help us and partner with us and respond to those endorsements so that we can start reflecting priorities better, preferences better, make a more representative and inclusive democracy, sorry. I need lunch. I hope everybody else is eating lunch while they're watching.
No, I appreciate it so much. It's so true. I mean, building the political power goes hand in hand with building our people power. And the people power does reflect and build into the political power. So I want to talk a little bit about why we were asking folks to canvass. I don't know that that's something we've asked folks to do much before, to canvass directly for a candidate and not just for a ranked choice voting election. And to echo a lot of what Nilu has said, the more legislative champions we have present, the more likely it is that we can pass our legislation. We need that 50+1 vote in our legislature, which, the math is not exactly 50, it's 98 and whatever, but we do need to get that over halfway mark. And there's a lot, as any of you who have followed along with us in previous legislative sessions, there's lots of little road marks we have to hit before we can really get to that vote. But ultimately what we're aiming for is having more than half the votes in the House and in the Senate here in Washington. So canvassing for these candidates is a way that we ensure that we have more of our votes secured. Candidates need people to turn out for them. It's not just money, it's not just clicks on Facebook, it's not just likes on Instagram. That one-to-one conversation is the most important way we know through data tested studies to encourage people to turn out their vote. And it's critical. And having a supporter come to your home, you going to somebody's home, does make a difference, and an important one. And Nilu would know as a candidate.
And candidates really are grateful. I got a very sweet message from Terry Niles that I'm going to do a shout out to our supporter Pam, who showed up both Saturday and then again on Sunday. They, I think showing up for candidates is something they really welcome, and it's a really great way to get to know them and also share your thoughts with them. Carrie, I had a question for you that you are not expecting. How else can our supporters help advance the message of ranked choice voting, is around candidates or in general?
Absolutely.
Really fun partnering with our organizing department. So I want to shine a little light on you.
Thank you so much. There are lots of ways to get involved. The most important things to know about organizing and getting involved with ranked choice voting is that you are a trusted messenger. You hold a lot of power just as yourself, hosting house parties, inviting your friends and family and your neighbors into your thought process and your belief and your hope for our democracy is huge. Right now, there's this amazing film circulating. It's called Majority Rules. It's a documentary that's shining a big light on the Alaska elections and the ways that ranked choice voting allowed Alaskan voters to have more voice and more choice and truly elect folks that were a true reflection of their values. We have a great opportunity to organize house parties around that, or bring it to a theater in your community. Things like that are huge and really important. And of course, as you know, as you've heard me say a million times, we are tabling this summer. We are out meeting people where they're at in their communities, in their hometowns, at the fairs and festivals their families and friends are attending. So there's always a way to get involved with us. You can find every event on our website and on our Mobilize page. And if there is something you want to see that's not there, reach out to us. We want to make it happen. We want to work with you to see that become a reality. Thank you, Nilu.
Yeah, I tried to throw you under the bus because you picked on me first a number of times, but you're just too good.
It's because I'm a youngest child. I'm used to getting picked on. All right, well, Nilu, thank you so much. Is there anything else we need to know about building political power here in Washington?
No, just make sure candidates are talking about it. When you're out there, and if you go to any candidate forums, make sure you ask or write letters to the editor. We love it when we see that. Make sure this conversation is happening. And if you can bring it directly to the candidates, especially in a place where they have to answer for a lot of people, that's the best thing, you know, on this side, in addition to, of course, the voting and talking about the candidates who support us. So
Thank you. And remind me, when do we need to turn our ballots in by for the primary elections?
August 6th, 8 p.m.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Nilu.
To vote up to day of. That's not true for the rest of the country. So if you know anybody that's not registered to vote, get in those votes.
Thank you so much. All right, and with that, I am going to remind everybody that another important way to be involved with Fair Vote Washington is to make a donation. We understand that your time is really precious and that perhaps these candidates that we're putting our full-throated support behind might not live near you, and you might not be able to travel across the state, but chipping in $5 once a month really goes a long way to ensure that we can bring these candidates in, that we can educate our neighbors, that we can build the excitement and normalization of the promise of ranked choice voting so that we can move this through. This is a long game, and your consistent support means a lot to us. So please consider donating $5 today. Please consider donating $5 monthly. Thank you so much. We're grateful to be in community with all of you. And if you have any questions, you can always reach out to us at info@fairvotewa.org. There are real people that see that. It doesn't go to a spam filter. We see it and we respond to it. So thank you. All right. All right. And with that, enjoy the rest of your lunch. I'll give you all 3 minutes back of your day. Take good care.
Y'all take care.